What's up, everybody? This is the Booch, and welcome to episode 5 of the Boochcast reviews, Darkside of the Ring. I am so excited to be back here with you guys this week because this episode that we're about to cover is my absolute favorite of the entire Darkside of the Ring series. I swear to God, out of all the episodes, this one's my favorite. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm still going to have passion, the same energy for the other episodes that are coming up, but this one for me was my personal favorite. And of course, we are talking about the mysterious death of Gorgeous Gino. Now, just to avoid any disclaimers and misunderstandings, the fact that he died is not why I like this episode. It's the story about his career and his gimmick that I love so much. I'm going to get into that in just a moment because we're not going to waste any time. We're going to jump right into this one. They start this off with giving us the facts. On February 4th, 1986, Gino Hernandez died. He had been dead for several days, and his body was discovered in his home in Highland Park. Rumors of his death get crazy. Some say it was an accident. Others say it was murder. And the only people that know what really happened are the people who were there. Now, his mother is convinced he was murdered. And she mentions that throughout this documentary, which was very, very powerful. Now, apparently growing up, Gino's mom was a model, but she was also a single parent who took care of Gino and his sisters. Gino was a good son, a good father, and a good man. But he was also a great heel. He was so good in the ring at getting heat. Fans would throw pennies at him when he walked to the ring. And when kids would ask for his autograph, he would either flip the paper out of their hands or he would take them and just rip them up in front of him and like insult the fans. Like that to me is a great heel. Like you couldn't dare ask for his autograph. He would rip it up in front of you. He wouldn't sign autographs. He wouldn't talk to fans. He was a bad guy. And like I've said many, many times before in this series, and will continue to say in the other episodes, back then, you lived the gimmick. If you were a heel, you were a heel in the public eye. You were a babyface, you were a babyface in the public eye. And you never flipped unless you did a turn in the ring. Now, he was the villain of the ring. His gimmick was evil. He had charisma, he was cocky, arrogant, good-looking, and talented. He looked like money. He was all about the finest suits, the finest custom-made shirts. He wore the rings on his fingers, the watches, you name it, that was Gino. And it wasn't a gimmick. That was him. And the thing is, it's easy to hate someone who is good looking and has money. In fact, that is basically a true statement even today. If you're good looking and you have money, it's easy not to like you. He insulted this cowboy who got up and he dared the cop to let him through. And he was so convincing, he convinced the cop to let him into the crowd. And then Gino quickly grabbed a ref and said, "Stop this." Like he wasn't really supposed to let the fan get by, but he convinced him so well the security guard let him by and then finally had to stop it. Otherwise, they wouldn't know what would happen. And the best part is Gino could do that without looking like a pussy because he was a heel. So when you're a heel, you're supposed to back down, not let anybody fight you. So it was genius. Now, Gino wrestled, a lot of territories for many years. He was in Southwest Championship Wrestling for a period of time, where he was nicknamed the Handsome Half-Breed, and he was trained by Jose Lothario. But then he got his big break in World-Class Championship Wrestling, which we talked about on last week's show. His stepfather was Luis Hernandez, who was also a pro wrestler. And they play wrestled all the time, most fathers and sons do. And his real name was Charles Wolf. That's Gino's government name, Charles Eugene Wolf Jr. Good thing he changed it to Gino, because that would not have worked. He was a natural in the ring, and he would wear his dad's boots. Now, we also meet in this documentary Gino's first wife, who was Janice. And what was great about Gino was, much like Bruiser Brody and a lot of other wrestlers, he kept his family life separate from the wrestling life. Now, even though working out took up most of his day, he was still a great parent and a family man. And sometimes his gimmick would slip up because he lived it, and his mom told him, "You need to drop that now because I know who you are." Like his family wouldn't take his shit, which was funny. And then, of course, he later formed a tag team with Chris Adams, and they were called the Dynamic Duo. And their biggest match was at the Cotton Bowl Extravaganza against the Von Erichs. And it was a hair versus hair tag match. And in the end, the Von Erichs won and shaved their heads. And their reaction sold it well. Like they were running away. They had to be dragged back into the ring. As they're shaving Gino's head, he's screaming, "No, no, no, no." He looks horrified. You know, they were running away, eventually being dragged back in, freaking out the whole time. It was so great. And then, of course, one thing they talked about Gino was the fact that there was a nightclub in Houston called Judges, where Gino would go to after matches. He would go over there and party all night. A wrestling manager named Lady Blossom was brought into the company, and she ended up living right next door to Gino. So they were neighbors. And Gino, of course, he was smoking dope. He did cocaine, a lot of uppers and downers. And it was the 70s and the 80s, and everyone in the business did it. So in this, just about everybody in the wrestling business during the 70s and the 80s was doing drugs. So it's not like there was an exclusive group. You know, pretty much everybody was doing them back then. Gino was not out of control on drugs, but did like to party. So he never got too crazy with drugs. And of course, Gino and Lady Blossom went to a nightclub, and Lady Blossom tells a story about how one night Gino gave Lady acid, and she was tripping balls all night. And he didn't tell her it was acid. She found out later when she was in the club and was tripping her balls off. And one time in Vegas, Gino had a friend and rented the whole top suite floor of the hotel, and they partied for 3 days. You know, it's one of those lessons where if you hang around trouble, you're going to get trouble. And David Manning, who was the world-class championship wrestling referee and a booker, says getting into wrestling is like getting into the mob. Once you're in, you're in. But it can go the other way too. So watch who you hang out with. And to me, that is probably one of the most valuable lessons you can learn in the business. Be mindful of the company you keep. Now, Jake heard they had power in Houston and Dallas. Denied he knew anything else about them. In fact, Jake looked scared during that part of the interview. Like, literally, he didn't want to talk too much about it. And Jake looked terrified. Like, he was, you know, worried that if he said anything, maybe they would come looking for him or something. Like, I'd never seen Jake look that nervous in an interview. Also around this time, his wife divorced him because she didn't feel safe around him. Now, Chris and Gino, as a tag team, eventually broke up and ignited a vicious rivalry. Gino sprayed Nair in Chris's eyes to blind him, which made sense because they lost their hair. And you use Nair to get rid of, you know, your hair. And also it helped because after that hair match, Gino's hair quickly grew back in 2 months. Adam's hair took way longer. And again, to keep kayfabe, Chris would pretend to be blind in real life. So literally, anytime he was out in public, he had these white patches over his eyes, and he'd be walking around. His wife would have to walk him around. That's how serious they took kayfabe. Now, the last time his mom saw him was Super Bowl Sunday, 1986. Apparently, Gino was fidgeting and nervous when he came in. He was acting nervous and antsy, and that something might happen to him. He grabbed something he hid in the house. No one knows what was in it to this day. Gino claims someone was in the back seat of his car. He slammed on his brakes, and the guy ran out of the car. People thought he was hallucinating, but Gino was convinced it was a person in his car, and he went to David to get a gun, and he didn't have one. Now, the last time Lady Blossom saw him, he had a white box with a peach pie in it. And he said he was going out, but if she wanted to stop by tomorrow, have a slice because it's delicious. Yeah, because that's not fucking creepy at all. Anyway, on his mom's birthday, she got a call from his manager asking if she had heard from Geno. She said, no, but it's my birthday, so I'm sure he'll call me and I'll let him know to call you. Lady Bossum looked next door and noticed his car parked in the driveway and it was out of alignment. And he missed a show in Oklahoma, and he wasn't known to no-show an event. And they couldn't get a hold of him. Now, Lady Blossom went next door and knocked on the door. All she could see was the pie on the table. Now, when he missed the show in Oklahoma, at first they didn't think nothing about it. They just chopped it up to maybe he had something going on. But then he missed a show in Houston, and that's when David got worried. Because it's not odd for Gino to miss a show in Oklahoma. But in Houston, oh, hell. He is not about to do that shit. So Rick couldn't see in the door, so he got over the wall, looked in, and saw the bed, and part of his body was on the floor. They called the police and saw he was dead, and the body had been laying there for 4 or 5 days. There was a gun on the scene. No one knows how he got it. The manager calls his mom to tell her Geno's dead, which I can only imagine how fucked up of a call that was. Now, apparently the body was so decomposed that the exact cause of death could not be determined. A loaded pistol was found next to his right hand, and they found no sign of drugs and paraphernalia in the condo. Now, a friend of Geno comes over to discuss funeral arrangements. He said Geno owed him a lot of money, and he said, don't worry about it because I'm going to pay for his funeral. He had no remorse or empathy. His mom can read a person very well with eye-to-eye contact, so she immediately felt uncomfortable about this guy. Now, Geno was buried in a platinum closed casket. His mom came dressed as a movie star because she knew that's how Geno would want her to look. A group of guys go up to the casket, toasting Geno, pouring champagne on the casket, breaking the glasses on the casket, told some crazy stories about him, lots of rich people, possibly drug dealers, and John Royale is the guy who confronted his mom. The mom kept her mouth shut to protect her daughters, and her first time talking about this whole incident was on Darkside of the Ring. Before they went to interview her and tell this story, she hadn't said shit about it. So he took trips to Houston. He gambled and owed money on a football game. Some say Chris Adams killed him because he blinded him. And police actually contacted him. Like, that's how serious they took wrestling. When Gino Hernandez was dead, people actually thought Chris Adams killed him. Which obviously wasn't true, because the whole thing was fucking scripted. Chris and Gino were still friends outside the ring. Now, the mom ends up doing her own investigation. And if she finds the culprit, she would take care of it herself and deal with the consequences later. Basically, this bitch was going to kill somebody. Which I don't blame her. You know, that's a mother whose child has just been killed. She's willing to go to jail to get vengeance for her son. And most parents would too. Now, he was super paranoid. When he went home, he locked the doors and had a deadbolt on the inside. And the deadbolt was not locked from the inside of the apartment. So someone had to be there. And the autopsy report said it was a drug overdose. He had 5 times the amount of cocaine in his system. It was enough to kill an elephant. Now, the coroner didn't understand how that much cocaine could get in someone's body. It also said he was morbidly obese and Hispanic, which, yeah, none of those were true. Obviously, if you look at Gino Hernandez, you know for a fact this motherfucker ain't morbidly obese. There's a reason why they called him Gorgeous Gino. It's because he was in incredible fucking shape. So, yeah, right there, they're already not telling the truth. In fact, it also said he was uncircumcised. And his wife says he was. So, obviously, his first wife, who he was married to, if she's telling you he's circumcised, the motherfucker's circumcised. Who's going to know better than the woman who sucked that dick for many years? That's all I'm saying. So his wife thinks he might have faked his own death because one night they were watching a sitcom about someone who faked his death and said he was going to do that one day. Now, his mom doesn't believe he faked his death because by now he would have heard from him. Now, Jake can see how he was murdered. And also, Jake the Snake was also in a tag team with Geno for a brief period of time as well. So they were also friends. Now, it took 30 years for answers to finally surface. Apparently, he felt someone was going to kill him weeks leading up to his death. Lady Blossom one night went over for drinks to talk to Geno. He pulls out a cereal bowl full of cocaine. And then he shushed her, not rudely. He plugged up the sink, turned the faucet on. It's overflowing to the floor, and he wouldn't let her unplug it. And he had a gun and told her to be quiet, but wasn't threatening her. He enjoyed the sound of the water and found it comforting. He would look out the window and stare at the darkness. He was afraid of the darkness in his mind, according to Lady Blossom. Jake knew he had issues with drugs because he was doing drugs with him. As we all know, Jake the Snake had a drug problem for many years. Rick dumped a sugar bowl of cocaine in a knee-jerk reaction. So it turns out that's why they didn't find drugs in the house, because when Rick found the body, he panicked and got rid of all the drugs, because usually when you see drugs and police are coming, your first reaction, flush this shit down the fucking toilet, because if you don't, you're fucking going to prison. And his mom was scared for most of her life. She believes the people he hung around are the reason he's dead. And they all want to know why he died. She was scared that the people that came after Gina were going to come after her. She spends most of her life looking over her shoulder. Now, producers contacted John Royale after interviewing his mom. John claims he was with Geno until 1 a.m. the night he died. He says he did visit his mom and said he'd pay for the funeral, but that Geno didn't owe him any money. That's the only part of the story that's not true, according to him. He said they were at a club, he was in a good mood and buying drinks, and he assumed that he was doing some drugs. Then Geno left with an airline stewardess, and that was the last time he saw him alive. Then later, an anonymous drug tracker had some info, and they have the mom listen on headphones to the story. And according to the drug tracker, he says he met Geno through other people in the group, and we got to be good friends in the 80s. Disco was popular as well as drugs, and they saw an opportunity to get involved in selling drugs, and one of the guys in the group cultivated a connection. He would bring it in, and he would give us each a certain amount of it, and not many people know that Geno was involved in this. He was a professional wrestler, and he saw us starting to make some money, and he thought it would be a good opportunity for him because he didn't make a lot of money as a wrestler, and it was basically just a way for some young guys to make some money, and it's just something that everybody was kind of doing in that period of time. Claims he died of a drug overdose, tells the family not to worry. He was a victim of his accord, and he knows that's hard to hear. And the mom is grateful for the anonymous message, and his mom forgave John Royale after hearing it and is happy to have closure. Now, John Royale gave a eulogy at Geno's funeral, saying in wrestling there are good guys and bad guys, and in the ring he was a bad guy, but outside the ring he was a good guy. There was no foul play with him, and he had a trial. John regrets not doing anything about Geno's drug problem. That's the only regret he has. Now, I will say this. Gino Hernandez deserves the Hall of Fame. And the reason I say that is because I see the people that go in, and there's no way Geno doesn't deserve it if those people have gone in. There are so many guys in the Hall of Fame that have skeletons in their closet. And in my opinion, Geno, the worst thing he did was drugs. You know? He wasn't an abuser. There's plenty of those in the Hall of Fame. Also, there's plenty of guys in the business that have done drugs and consumed alcohol, and they're in the business. For Gino Hernandez not to go in the business is ridiculous. And the reason is because when I saw this Darkside of the Ring, out of the promos Gino was cutting, and the way he dressed and the way he carried himself, he was basically a version of Ric Flair. And in my opinion, he does the Ric Flair style and profiling better than Rick does. In fact, I would say this. If Gino Hernandez was still alive today, he would have had Ric Flair's career. I honestly believe that. I think Gino is better than Ric Flair. As far as promos, as far as in the ring, Geno to me is fucking amazing. Like I said, I definitely want to look at world-class championship wrestling and see some more of his matches. But I truly believe this is a guy who could have made it big in WCW. I think he had a decent shot of making it in the WWE. And today, I think if he went to AEW, maybe he could help some of the young guys there or be a trainer at the Performance Center. There's a lot that Geno could have done if he had stayed alive and wasn't on drugs. But ultimately, this guy had an amazing wrestling career. His story was awesome, aside from the death, of course. And what I love most about it was I got to learn something new about the business that I didn't know before. I mean, granted, you know, there was some aspects in other episodes previously that I didn't really know, but obviously I knew about Macho Man and Elizabeth's relationship to a degree. I did learn some new stuff, but I knew a lot. Montreal Screwjob, knew a lot about that. But, you know, did learn some new stuff there. Killing a Bruiser Brody, I knew Jose stabbed him. I just didn't know a lot of the other details. And even the Von Erichs. I knew they had skeletons in their closet. I just didn't know how bad they were. This was a story from start to finish I knew nothing about. About a wrestler I had never heard of. But now that I have, I think he's the fucking man. And if he had, like I said, if he was still alive today and could still wrestle, I think he would have been the man. Like I said, I believe Ric Flair has the career that he has because this man died in 86. And that, ladies and gentlemen, will conclude the mysterious death of Gorgeous Gino. Like I said, I loved this episode. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was very well done, very entertaining. Getting to see this guy's career, getting to see how talented he was, seeing all this great moments. And like I said, I definitely, like, things like this make me want to watch world-class championship wrestling. And I'm glad, at least on the network, they have it. Hopefully, if they transfer to Peacock, and I decide to get a Peacock subscription, it'll be there on Peacock. But either way, I thank you guys for taking this journey with me. This will cover Boochcast Reviews Darkside of the Ring. Make sure you guys tune in next week. We got a great episode for you guys. We're going to be covering the Fabulous Moolah next week. That's right. The life and career of the Fabulous Moolah. I cannot wait to check it out. Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button and ring that bell to be notified so you never miss another episode of the Boochcast Reviews Darkside of the Ring, as well as other great Boochcast YouTube content. Follow us on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/Boochcast, BOOCHCAST. Also, like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram and Twitch. Also, support the show through Patreon. You guys know the spiel by now. And I'll talk to you guys next week. And until then, pizza, baby!